From Lewiston, Auburn, to the Western Mountains, the St. John Valley, Bangor, and areas down east, Maine's 2nd Congressional District covers nearly 80% of Maine, making it the largest district east of the Mississippi. And with control of Congress sharply divided, it also gets national attention. It's one of the truest swing districts in the country, voting for both Republicans and Democrats in recent years. And now, Jared Golden is seeking a 4th term in Congress, while his challenger, former NASCAR driver and Republican nominee Austin Theriault, hopes to change that. And for the first time, the two are about to share a debate stage to discuss the issues important to you. It's Your Voice, Your Future, Maine's 2nd District Congressional Debate, and it starts right now.
Hello and a warm welcome to you. I'm Greg Lagerquist. I'll be your moderator tonight, but tonight isn't about me. It's about these two. They are Jared Golden and Austin Theriault. A very warm welcome to both of you as well. Now, we're going to be hearing a lot more from them and a lot less than me from the next hour or so. But first, I do want to welcome in my long-team colleague for doing these debates. He is the political editor from the Bangor Daily News, Mike Shepard. He's going to be joining me and asking the questions tonight. Great to have you again, Mike.
Hey, good to be here, Greg.
All right, we're going to get to those questions in just a moment. First, though, a quick word about the rules for you folks at home. We're going to begin with opening statements, followed by questions and answers. Now, each candidate is going to have 1 minute to answer each question. We don't like to cut anybody off. We will, though, if the candidate's abusing that time or interrupting during their answer time. We'll then have a rebuttal and discussion period. We do want to say our format encourages that discussion to really get at the issues, what the candidates think, where they differ. Then at the end of this debate, of course, we'll have closing statements. So at that point, let's go ahead and get to it, right? If you're ready, we're ready as well. We'll ask these questions. And again, we did have a coin flip before we started here tonight to determine the order in which they would stand before you and the order in which they would answer questions. We begin with Jared Golden. You have 2 minutes, 2 minutes for opening statements.
Thank you very much. Look, I've been doing this job for 6 years now, and I've learned a lot about what it means to be a representative in Congress, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I've learned what it means to be your representative. There are a few things in life that have taught me the greatest lessons. Number one, being a part of a family, being a husband to my wife, Izzy, being a father to our 2 daughters, Rosemary and Shirley. Next, my time in the Marines, serving in Afghanistan and Iraq. These are real-world life and death experiences that you learn a lot from. Finally, this job here in Congress has expanded the horizons of my understanding of what it means to be a Mainer and to live in Maine. I used to look at it through the lens of growing up in Leeds, Maine, living in Lewiston, Auburn. Now I've had the honor of representing this community, this big, huge district, for 6 years now, and I've learned a lot about your life and your communities as well. It's been a huge honor, and I just want to thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to what I'm sure will be a good conversation tonight.
Thank you very much. Austin Theriault, the floor is yours. You have 2 minutes, please.
First of all, thank you for putting this on, and certainly thank you for the listeners here tonight. My name is Austin Theriault. I'm from Fort Kent. I'm currently a state representative in the House. I have the pleasure of representing Western Aroostook County, and we've done a lot of good work in the House this past session. Some of you folks may also remember my earlier days working in the family business, washing trucks and greasing them as a high schooler. I later went on to race in NASCAR. I've been owning my own business ever since then. But what got me there is the hard work ethic that I learned coming from a kid in St. John Valley. I know my grandparents are probably watching tonight, and certainly my niece and nephew, 3 and 4 years old. I think about what my grandparents taught me, which is if you want to accomplish anything in life, you got to work hard. You got to make sacrifices for your community, and you have to make sure that you hold people accountable. When you give somebody your word, you follow through. And as far as my niece and nephew, I want them to know when they're watching tonight that we can do better. The last 4 years, and certainly even longer than that, it's been difficult for a lot of us. We have an immigration crisis at the southern border. We have fentanyl coming across, killing our kids in our communities. We have inflation that's really stifling the economy, and it's making it hard for people to make ends meet. Our natural resource industry, which is the industry that I came from, being born in a logging and farming family, those industries are under attack, especially the lobster industry, because of the regulations coming out of Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, our Congressman Golden hasn't been as much of a fighter as we needed in the 2nd District. We have an attack on the lobster industry. He flip-flopped on that issue. We have an issue with spending, which is out of control, driving inflation. He's flip-flopped on that issue. He's even flip-flopped on the Second Amendment, and he won't even tell us who he's supporting in the most important presidential election of our lifetime. At the end of the day, we need to put people over politics. There's too much divisiveness in Washington. I'm somebody that can bring balance and less extremism, and we need that right now in the 2nd District because we're falling behind. Let's work together and make a change, and I look forward to earning your vote.
All right, thank you to you both for our opening statements. Let's go ahead and get right to the questions, right? As we actually just heard alluded to, the presidential race hangs over this election more than most. Both races look extremely close, the 2nd District race and the presidential race. Let's get ahead and ask you this question. And your pitch to undecided voters, that's what we're trying to get at here. What's your pitch? Democrat, Republican, Independent in the 2nd District. Why you? Why not the other guy? What is your pitch? And based on our format, we begin with Jared Golden. You have 1 minute, please.
Well, for independent voters or for people who are currently undecided, I would say just give a good hard look at my record. I've been one of the most independent-minded members of Congress, one of the most bipartisan in different times, whether there was a Republican in the White House, when it was President Trump. I voted with him more often than your average Democrat by a long shot. When it's a Democrat in the White House, President Biden, I voted against him more than any other Democrat in the House of Representatives. And I've been willing to work with either one of them when I thought that was what was in the best interest of my constituents in the country. And so, I've been that kind of pragmatic, thoughtful representative that I think people are looking for.
Thank you very much. Same question to you, Austin Theriault. You have 1 minute, please.
Well, thanks for the question. For folks that don't know, the St. John Valley's traditionally been Democrat. And I was able to win that seat because we talked about the issues that were important to the folks in my district. And right now, those of you that are listening in the district, we knew that we had work to do with infrastructure. We knew that our natural resource industries were struggling. And we certainly knew that the economic opportunities for the kids that are graduating high school were nowhere near where they needed to be. So in my term in the State House, I was one of the most primary as a Republican. Because as a Republican, I did vote sometimes with the Democrats on issues that I felt like were beneficial for my district. That's what we need. We need more balance and less extremism in Washington. I'm somebody that can go down there and get the job done. I want to advocate for everybody, regardless of if you're an independent or a Democrat. I'm a Republican, but I understand people have diverse backgrounds, different opinions. They come from different walks of life. But I strongly feel like we actually agree on more than we realize sometimes. And that's what we have to remember, especially in this divisive climate right now where it's this person against this person. It's tearing our fabric of the country apart. We can do better than that.
Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and bring Mike. He has a follow-up question for us.
Yeah, Jared Golden, you've said you aren't supporting Donald Trump in this election, but have otherwise refused to say how you're going to vote. 4 years ago, you were crystal clear. You were voting for President Biden. Why don't voters deserve an answer to that question now?
Well, the first thing I would point out, Mike, is that Austin actually agreed with my current position back in December when he was in a primary and there was still a choice. Nikki Haley was in the race, Donald Trump and others. He actually put out a statement in the press where he said, look, the people of Maine can make this decision for themselves. They're smart. And he went on to say the last thing that they need is another politician telling them how to vote or trying to influence their vote. Of course, he's changed his mind about that. But I think that he's spot on, to be honest with you. I think people are hungry for the local opinion to inform the national, not the other way around. And so all I want people to understand is whether you're voting for Donald Trump, whether you're voting for Kamala Harris or someone else, I want your vote to be your representative in Washington based upon the merits of the job I've done the last 6 years.
Mike, I think you had another follow-up.
Well, Austin, you can respond to that if you want.
Yeah, I'd like to respond, Mike. Here, at the end of the day, we're in a general election. It's the most important election, and certainly in my lifetime, and I would imagine in Jared's lifetime. We want people that can make decisions and stick with them, right? And this is an issue for me that I've had to make a tough decision in the primary, and now, the fact that Republicans used my voting record against me. I am somebody that believes Donald Trump is going to do better for our folks here in the 2nd District. I don't agree with his rhetoric. I don't agree with his personality and how and what he does on Twitter and all that stuff. But this is about making tough decisions, right? And I'm making that decision. I do think the voters deserve to know. Once again, it's about who you're supporting. It shows judgment. It shows the ability to stand up when you believe that something is the right thing. And when we're facing all these issues in the 2nd District, like our lobstermen being under attack right now, you can't waffle. You can't, say one thing one day and another thing another day. You have to stick with what you believe in. And this comes down to a fundamental difference between Jared Golden and I, is you'll never question what I believe in. It doesn't mean we're always going to agree, but I'm not afraid to say who I'm supporting for president. And I really think it's time for him to come straight forward and say he's voting for Kamala Harris.
I want to ask a follow-up to you, Austin Theriault, if I may. In May, when you were in the primary, you had ads, for example, that came out in May talking about how proud you were to have the endorsement of Donald Trump. We've heard you more recently, once that we're in the general election, Just now, we heard it from you as well, saying how you disagree with him on some things. You weren't saying it quite that strongly in the primary. Has something changed between now and then?
No, I'm proud of the fact that during that administration, we had low inflation. We had an economy that was working for more people. The immigration crisis was being addressed, right? There was a conversation that was going on. In fact, Jared Golden voted against one of the strongest border security legislation ever hit the House floor during the Trump administration. And now he says he's supporting border security. So for me, it's about, I was proud of the fact that America was coming back. We were creating jobs. We were creating opportunities for the middle class. Real wages, which is the fact that you can take home more and you don't have to pay as much for groceries and electricity and gas. People had more money in their pockets. That's what I was talking about.
All right. And Jared Golden, I want to give the last word to you since we've had more time with Austin Theriault. You did say in an op-ed recently, obviously when Joe Biden was still in the race, that you were okay with Donald Trump winning and you expected it to happen. Joe Biden's obviously dropped out. You also said very strongly, though, you would not vote for Donald Trump. You still feel that way?
I do. But look, the job in Congress is to be part of the checks and balance system. And that means whoever's in the White House, whether it's a member of your own party or of the other party, your job is to hold them in check, find balance, and then to work with them. I'm going to work with whoever's in the White House, whether it's Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, when I think that's what's best for Maine, and I'm going to stand in their way whenever I think it's what's not in the best interest of the state.
All right, I'd like to move on, but Austin Theriault, you signaled you'd like a quick follow-up.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. I mean, it sounds great, Jared, but the problem is you said you're going to advocate for the policies you believe in to the administration. You're not willing to say you support Kamala Harris, and you said you have never met with Joe Biden privately during your tenure. How is that possible? We have all these issues going on in the 2nd District right now, and you haven't either asked for a meeting with Joe Biden or they haven't given you a meeting with Joe Biden. Both of them are deeply concerning to me. So the fact that you're saying you want to hold them accountable and fight for the Maine people, but you haven't gotten a meeting or you haven't been successful getting a meeting is quite troubling. Certainly, I don't care who's president, if it's Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. Like, you can promise you on day one, I'm going to be asking for a meeting.
Please respond if
These
you'd
are
like.
great talking points, and that's all that they are. They're empty, hollow rhetoric. That's it. Let's just talk about the fishermen, about Maine's lobstermen. I pushed against those regulations that were brought against that fishery related to whales, starting in 2019 when President Trump was in the White House. I reached out to him directly asking for his help to do something about it. Nothing. I did the same when it was Joe Biden. And at the end of the day, in December of 2022, after the last election, I got a 6-year freeze on those regulations from moving forward. That's standing by our fishery. And it's getting the job done. Austin just tried to claim that I have turned my back on the lobstermen. Nothing could be further from the truth.
And I'd like to get into this more in a moment, but I do want to move on if we can, and we'll come back to some of these topics, as you might imagine, and I'll give more time.
Come back to that topic because my name was mentioned.
We are going to go back to that topic. If you'd like to extend for 30 seconds, if you'd like to directly respond.
Just quickly, and I look forward to talking about this more in depth, but if you support the lobster industry, you should not have supported the Inflation Reduction Act, which funded NOAA at extremely high levels. That also is the reason we have offshore wind coming to the Gulf of Maine. It's the reason we have electric vehicle mandates popping up around the United States. So I think if you're playing defense on an issue that you started, shame on you for opening up the can of worms that the lobstermen and women are having to deal with right now. And it's something that we may not ever be able to come back from because we're facing billions and billions of dollars that are being funded into these green energy companies, and they're just coming because they see the money, they see the profits they can make, and it's going to decimate our lobster industry.
I feel like you two are debating, so I'm going to let it continue. Jared Golden, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. Look, part of this job is taking big bills. That's almost always the form they come in, often called omnibus bills. They're thousands of pages long, involving billions and billions of dollars of spending. Most of the time, you're going to find there's things in there that are good for your communities, and there's things in there that you don't agree with. You got to make the hard call. So just looking at that bill that put a freeze on the regulations on Maine lobstermen, that same bill gave money to NOAA. So this is kind of like a heads he wins, tails I lose type of proposition he's putting forward. If I'd voted against that funding bill, which blocked those regulations, he'd be criticizing me for voting no. Now he wants to criticize me because that budget bill also gave money to NOAA.
All right, I'm going to put a pin in this for the moment because we're going to come back to it. I do want to move on to our next topic. This question actually is about the economy, obviously a huge one for a lot of folks. Specifically, it's about high costs, about inflation. Frankly, it's about worry as well. And the specific question tonight comes from one of our viewers in the 2nd District in Otisfield, Take a listen.
What can you do to make everyday lives better for these Mainers that aren't educated, don't have a bankroll, can't get by day?
All right, that was Simone, probably speaking, frankly, for a lot of folks. Frustration there, especially from blue-collar workers who may feel left out, maybe feel left behind. So let's go ahead and turn to the candidate. What is your specific plan? What are you going to do to help somebody like Simone, somebody who's saying, hey, what can you do for blue-collar workers, maybe in particular, who are feeling left out by the economy? And based on our alternating format, we begin with Austin Theriault.
Well, this is a very complex question, and I appreciate it. One of the things that I believe is driving inflation is the high energy costs. You look up your energy bill, especially your electricity bill, the last couple months. You've seen it skyrocket, especially over the last couple of years. And that's driven by the wasteful spending coming out of Washington, D.C. They voted for things like the wasteful tax credits and green energy schemes in the Inflation Reduction Act. And that's why you have land in Maine being cleared for these solar panel fields. You have offshore wind and all that. It sounds great. We want clean energy. We want a clean environment. But there's other technologies we can look at to make sure that we drive down costs for energy, and we make sure that ratepayers, which is me and you and grandmother, and especially if you have a small business and you're watching. There was a small business that I know the owner. It was a chip plant in Milo. $6,000 extra a month. What do they have to do? They pass that cost on to the consumer. So what you're feeling right now is the cost being passed through the economy, which ultimately the end consumer feels. And so I'm going to go to work on day one and look at reforming our energy policy so that we can bring more American energy online in our country. We obviously got to make sure it's clean, but the technology is emerging for us to do that. And we don't have to spend billions of dollars on the backs of the middle class so we can get profits for these large energy companies that are just swimming in money.
All right, thank you very much. Same question to you, Mr. Golden.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Inflation Reduction Act, since Austin's been, I think, misrepresenting what's in that legislation. First of all, that bill forced the Biden administration to release 4 leases for oil and gas drilling that they were trying to ignore. They were already on the books. They were trying to cancel them. There's been 24 new leases for oil and gas drilling in this country since that law went on the books. So at the time that I voted for that, gas was almost $5 a gallon. Now it's about $3 a gallon. I'd like to see it go even lower. But the fact of the matter is, since we passed that law, we have drilled and produced more oil and gas in this country than ever before in the history of the United States. That's the result of that legislation he's talking about. We've also driven down costs for Mainers with that law in the healthcare space. There's about 100,000 Mainers on Medicare who now have $35 insulin guaranteed, and starting on January 1 of 2025, they're going to experience $100 to $500 savings on average on their prescription medications. There's about 30,000 families in the 2nd District who are saving about $500 a year on their health insurance premiums because of the Inflation Reduction Act. Austin wants to cherry pick the things in that bill that he wants to attack me on, but he's completely ignoring the things that are in it that have been good for lowering prices for Mainers, whether it was gases, health insurance, you name it. That bill also had a 48C tax credit, which has brought $16 million to Timber HP, the mill that has reopened where the former paper mill was in Madison. It's now making a wood product that's going to be good for the economy. It's brought back 100+ jobs, and that $16 million flows right out of that bill. It's going to help them open up a 3rd product line, and they're going to be able to complete their hiring process to get up to about 150 workers. That's jobs. Those are good paying jobs, and I'm proud of the things in that bill that have delivered for Mainers.
Thank you very much. And before we get to follow-ups and discussion, I believe you have a question, Mike.
Yeah, I just wanted to go to actually a point of agreement with you guys. You both support 10% tariffs on all imports, which the Tax Foundation said last year is equivalent to about a $300 billion annual tax hike on Americans and could threaten jobs if other countries retaliate in kind. So why do you both think it is worth it? Starting with you, Austin.
Well, I think we need to defend American workers and American jobs here at home. The difference between Jared Golden and I is I've always supported the tariffs. Now, I think there are ways that we can be more selective. There are some industries that we can look at, including lumber and steel, where those tariffs are going to have to be different. At the end of the day, I've been consistent on this issue. When Golden ran for Congress the first time, he said he supported free trade. What have we seen with free trade? We've seen manufacturing move out of the state of Maine. We've seen paper mills literally closing by the dozen here in the state of Maine. There's many other industries that have been affected by this. And, it's interesting that he says he's not supporting Trump for president. Trump is actually the president that brought this to the forefront and opened up the conversation within the Republican Party. that tariffs may be something we have to look at to strengthen our economy, make sure we can reshore some of these jobs that have moved to China, India, and other countries. And there's an environmental aspect to this too, because we look at pollution, we look at China and India. Some of the most highly polluted countries in the world are manufacturing our goods that we're importing into this country. If we want to address inflation, we want to provide jobs here, and we want to clean up the economy. The American economy is some of the cleanest jobs you can find.
And I believe let's go ahead and have the same question answered by Jared Golden, if you would, please.
Well, look, my record in opposition to bad trade deals is well established, and I'm frankly surprised to hear Austin suggest otherwise. But people back home know what my record is, particularly the working class people, blue-collar workers in places like Bath Iron Works. There are paper mills all around the state. They know what my record is and what I've stood for. In regards to tariffs, Michael, I guess I would say this. First of all, if Austin does this job long enough, he's going to find some things where he says, you know what, I've changed my mind. I've got a different perspective right now. One of the biggest tells about tariffs, in my opinion, is that when the Biden administration came into office, they could have repealed those tariffs that Trump put into place if they thought that they were truly bad for the American economy, but they've left them in place for 4 years now. And they've even added to them, specifically in the space of renewable energy against China, steel, and a lot of other important industries here in the United States. It may be true that tariffs increase the cost of foreign goods that are being imported into the United States, but that is specifically what they're designed to do in order to incentivize the consumption of American-made goods, which will help create American jobs. Tariffs in general, and we saw this under the Trump administration, will push down unemployment, which will then have good upward pressure on wages for American workers as well. So there's a little bit of give and take here in the tariff space. But I think in the moment we're in right now, we should continue with them and even expand upon them.
Follow-up.
Austin, I just wanted to go back to your idea. So you say you support the 10% tariffs, but you said there were some goods that needed to be adjusted. Just to be clear, this is a flat 10% tax on all exports, tariff on all exports. So what are you talking about there?
There may be some goods we have to look at taxing over 10%, and that's why I said in some ways the 10% may not be adequate for all industries. You look at some products like steel and lumber, we talk about where the Canadians are subsidizing industries, and obviously the steel industry has been hard hit because of the free trade that we've seen over the past many decades. And I want to touch briefly on why Washington's broken, because, and Jared mentioned it. There was some good things in that in the bill, including the ability to negotiate down prescription drug costs and capping insulin at $35. But they filled that bill with literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of pork, and you had to pay for it. You're going to continue to pay for it when you fill up your gas tank, when you pay your electricity bill, and certainly right now with the mandates of electric cars and electric infrastructure right here across Maine, they're putting more emphasis on that than actually supporting our industries that have been here for hundreds of years.
And we'll get a final word if we can, 30 seconds or so, if we, Mr. Golden, if you'd like.
Austin keeps talking about renewable energy proposals. Most of the stuff that I've seen in the solar space, offshore wind, EV mandates, coming out of Augusta, where he serves, and he's failed to stop it. I even, after voting against EV mandates at the federal level, took the time to submit testimony at the state level against a proposal for an EV mandate that would match the California standard. Austin didn't even show up to testify for that. He came the second time there was a hearing after he realized that I was out there in opposition to it.
I do need to extend based on what you just said.
Yeah, so what's going on here is Golden is not willing to say he made a mistake by voting for the Inflation Reduction Act. That act should have been amended, and if there was enough people that had a backbone in Congress to vote no on it, that would have been amended, and the good things would have been passed, and the other stuff wouldn't have been. How can you say you oppose EV mandates when there's literally billions of dollars? Look it up. Look it up, I promise you, look it up. There's billions of dollars in EV tax credits. There's billions of dollars in build-out for infrastructure. In fact, the folks that brought the EV mandate to Augusta to have this conversation that we'd actually fought against mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act several times because they said, we can do this, we can do it. There's all this money floating around in the economy to build out the infrastructure so people can buy these electric cars. We don't want them in Maine. We don't want them. And so, once again, having both sides of the issue, you pass the bill and then you realize all the junk's in it because most Congress people don't read the whole bill, and then you've got to do your homework to try to fix the mess. That's why people are tired of the system.
I do need to catch you. I'm very aware Austin Theriault's answers have been longer than Jared Golden's.
Sure, I mean, the fact of the matter is there's no EV mandate in the Inflation Reduction Act. Plain and simple. Right. He said, read the bill, so go read it. It's not in there.
I didn't say there was a mandate.
At the end of the day, look, I stood up to the Build Back Better proposal that was President Biden's premier legislation. I said no to it because I thought that it would make inflation worse. I thought that it was poorly designed, and I didn't think that would benefit Maine at the end of the day. Because I stood up to that bill, which was started as a $6 trillion proposal, boiled down to $2 trillion, it didn't become law. And then we later passed the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, there may be some things we even agree in it that we don't like, but at the end of the day, that's the vote that had to be taken. It's the vote that was put on the House floor, and all those things in there that I described, the benefits for our seniors on Medicare, the explosive power of American oil and gas that's been unleashed by that legislation, that's all worth that vote at the end of the day, and I stand by that vote.
I'd like to put a pin in this and move on if I can as well. Plenty of time. We've still got about a half an hour or so, a little more. We'll come back to this if you both wish to.
Please, yeah, that would be great.
But I do want to move on. Our next question, we're just a few weeks away now, as most of our viewers know, especially those in the Lewiston area. 1 year since the mass shooting. Jared Golden, as Austin Theriault mentioned a moment ago, you did reverse yourself on a support for so-called assault weapons at ban. Austin Theriault, you've opposed any new gun measures while calling for record investment in mental health. Let's get to specifics, though, gentlemen, if we can. What are you specifically willing to pass? What do you want to do? What's important to you in the aftermath of what happened to our community a year ago? And based on our alternating format, we begin with Jared Golden.
Sure. I've been serving in public office for 10 years now, first at the state level and at the federal level. I have a long record as it relates to gun rights and also public safety. And I think that my record reflects my effort to find a balance between protecting the individual right and ensuring that we provide for public safety, which is a big duty for anyone in office. There have been times where I voted against proposed regulations that I thought unnecessarily would have infringed on the individual right. I've got a lot of votes. You've probably asked me about them before in interviews where people didn't agree, but I thought it was the right thing to do to protect the Second Amendment. There's been other votes where I've thought in order to address a problem, whether it be cracking down on domestic abuse or trying to make it harder for people who aren't supposed to have firearms to get their hands on them, I've been there. It's true. I used to oppose the assault weapons ban, and after 18 people were murdered, 13 wounded in Lewiston, I had a change of heart. It's plain and simple. At the end of the day, it called into question certain beliefs that I had. Are we actually any safer with these firearms? You know, I once heard it said by a police officer that the best firearm is the one that you have when you need it. These rifles are exceedingly lethal. And I've got one myself, and so many people across the state do. When someone comes in the door of a public place with one of those firearms, which are more deadly, ours is in the safe back home, or potentially it's in the truck, best case scenario. We have to have a bigger conversation. How do we truly provide for safer communities and keeping our families safe, and balance that with our own individual rights?
And we'll come back to it during discussion, but you have 1 minute. Austin Theriault, please.
Yeah, this is an important topic because at the end of the day, I think that this opened up a conversation, an important conversation that we need to have as people here in Maine. And that's we failed you. We failed to make the investments in community mental health. We failed at the national level to make sure that the funds were available. At the end of the day, years and years ago, there was a transition away from mental health institutions to community mental health. And that's because we felt like that was more compassionate. Those investments have not come through in the way we need. I have a family member that works in community mental health, and they help people that are in crisis right now. In this case, in the Lewiston tragedy, we know that this was not an issue where we have to attack the Second Amendment. In fact, I'm the only one in this race that's gotten the endorsement of SAM, who previously, well, actually, I've got an A rating from SAM, an organization that previously gave him an A rating, got an A rating from Gun Owners of Maine. They gave Jared an F rating. I have the support of people in law enforcement. In fact, I have the support of 7 sheriffs across the 2nd District, because I do believe, right, as Maine gun owners, we're law-abiding citizens, and we should protect those rights. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be a hazard to yourself, or you're going to be danger to somebody else, we have current laws on the books with the yellow flag law. That was a bipartisan law that came through the Maine House and Senate, signed by the governor years ago. That unfortunately was not used in this event, and so unfortunately, Jared's flip-flop on this issue would not have addressed and solved this problem and wouldn't have stopped it from happening. I'm going to make sure that we find the root cause of these issues and address them so that we don't have to go through this again.
I believe we have a follow. I don't want to apologize. We have a brand new light right out of the box. It's sort of flickering in the studio, so apologies. And unfortunately for Mike, it's pointing at him. Mike, you have a follow-up.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to press you for some specifics on your plan, Austin. You know, you talked a little bit about community mental health services. Are you looking at insurance? Are you looking at workforce development? I mean, this has been an industry that's been hard hit by the pandemic and, you know, reliance on low-wage workers as well. So where are you on that?
I mean, for example, I'd like to double the block grants from a federal level for community mental health specifically. And we go back. And Jared's going to laugh at me for going back to the Inflation Reduction Act, but that's going to turn up to be a $1 trillion bill over the period of time because there's more people that are taking the tax credits in. Just 10% of that bill could have been reallocated for a mental health bill that we've never seen in this country. And I called for that, and even in the primary, even in my Republican primary, I said we need once-in-a-lifetime investment in mental health. And we can do that through block grants. We can do that obviously through working at the state level as well. This is not just the federal level, but we have to get serious. And in fact, my own party should get serious about this because it's always been something that we've struggled with. And if we want to address this issue of violence and mass shootings in our country, don't go after the Second Amendment. Let's talk about making these investments that we've been waiting for decades.
Important rebuttal here. Austin says that the response to the shooting in my hometown should be about mental health and about public safety and law enforcement. In Augusta, just back in April, he voted against the budget that provided mental health funding for Lewiston Auburn in response to the shooting. Millions of dollars in investments in mental health, both in the moment for the community, for the victims and their families, and looking forward into the future. Now he just wants to talk about what he might possibly do at the federal level, but we see his voting record right in Augusta. He voted no. He voted in that same budget against $5 million for the state police to increase hiring, to give them a pay raise. Conversely, in the last couple of budget cycles, I brought in directly earmarks of $5 million for law enforcement across the entire district, at every level, state police, municipal departments, and almost every sheriff's department in the district. So you got to look at the actual voting record. In this case, Austin's is pretty bad.
I'd like to move on, but obviously a chance for Austin Theriault to respond.
And, you know, I really feel bad for the listeners at home because they have to watch all the ads that are being played right now. Jared, you talk about getting money out of politics. I have to say, you're doing a great job this year keeping the airways full of lies and shows you're running a really desperate campaign. The reality is the governor asked for 32 state police positions. And what did your party do? They stripped money out of that to pay for illegal housing. That's why I voted no on that bill, because our law enforcement deserve better. We know in rural Maine right now, rural patrol is being understaffed, right? Sheriff department can't keep up, and local towns can't keep up. We asked for more law enforcement, 32 positions in fact, and we didn't get it. Governor Mills, that was her original proposal. We backed the governor on that proposal. So, you know, without providing context, desperation, Jared.
Obviously, I'll give a chance for you to respond to that specifically.
Look, part of the way that this works is you have to decide if you're going to take a half a loaf or no loaf. Austin said he wanted more money for law enforcement. That's great. It's admirable. I probably would agree with him about that. But the vote that he took was for nothing, whether it was mental health or law enforcement.
All right, we'll come back to this as well, we promise, but we're already sort of eliminating questions from the back end as we talk, but that's the point. We want to get at these folks talking about their differences. So let's move on to the next question, because we did put a pin in this question. It's about the fishing industry and about lobstering, and it does have an audio component. Maine's fishing industry contributes billions of dollars, thousands of jobs to Maine's economy, but that industry, lobstering in particular, as we've been saying, has been under a lot of pressure lately. Austin Theriault introduced a new political ad on National Lobster Day. We do want to play a part of that ad right now.
Washington politicians allow Canada to illegally lobster in our waters, decimating our lobster population, stealing from the next generation.
All right, a lot of people have seen that ad, so let's go ahead and talk about it. Austin Theriault, you mentioned ads a moment ago. Let's talk about this one first. What do you specifically refer to in this ad, and what would you do differently than Maine's current delegation in Washington?
Well, I'm specifically talking about the gray zone, and every time I've been down to the coast, I've met with lobster fishermen, and they're constantly bringing this issue up. They feel like there's an unfair competition right now going on in the gray zone, and they feel like our federal officials, including the administration that you've never asked for a meeting with, has failed to negotiate more accountability when it comes to making sure our American lobstermen have more area to fish. So that's specifically what I'm talking about. And I'm going to go down there on day one and obviously ask for a meeting with the next administration and say, we have an issue up here in Maine and let's finally solve it. We have the ability, because we're the largest economy in North America, we can sit down at the table with Canada and say, look, we've got to fix this now. If in fact, if we don't, there's going to be repercussions. So this is an international trade issue. I would support more enforcement when it came to enforcing if the policy were to change and they were to move the area around in the gray zone. I would be more supportive of additional funding for things like the Coast Guard.
Thank you very much. Same question to you, Mr. Golden.
And the gray zone is the only contested maritime border that the United States shares with another country. That issue that he's talking about, there's already efforts carried out by Coast Guard to try and enforce any kind of illegal fishing in that area that's occurring on both sides of the border. It's got nothing to do with myself or with anyone in the delegation. Austin's really trying to deflect from my positive record as it relates to the fishermen. I've talked about the successful blocking of regulations that could have put them out of business all the way through the end of 2028. I have put forward other proposals to protect them from unfair Canadian trade practices. I currently am fighting to block something, lobstermen back home will understand what this is, a gauge increase, another proposed regulation coming out of Washington that Canadian fishermen wouldn't have to face themselves. That's unfair, and I'm fighting back against it. And once again, Austin also has a record. There's what he says about supporting fishermen, and then there's what he does in Augusta. That same budget that he voted against had $20 million for rebuilding waterfronts all over Maine after the big storms last winter. All the piers, fishing equipment, boats, and other things that were damaged or lost. $20 million right there to help those communities recover, to get those fishermen back on their feet. Austin voted no.
I believe you can respond to that.
Yeah, let's talk about specifically offshore wind again. And this goes back to Jared's consistent flip-flopping on supporting the lobster industry. Try to find a lobster industry person right now that thinks that offshore wind's a good idea. And then I really struggle to understand why Jared voted for legislation in Washington, D.C. that's opened up a can of worms that's going to allow offshore wind development here in the Gulf of Maine. And now he says he's fighting against it. In terms of the gray zone, I'll go back to that once again. He says, well, we really can't do anything about it. That's what's wrong with politics, right? The legislative branch and the President of the United States have the ability, because we control the purse strings and the president is the bully pulpit. We could get this done if we really wanted to. This has been going on for too long. I want to sit down at the table with Canadians, or at least get the right people to sit down at the table with Canadians. Let's use the power of the American purse and let's get this fixed and addressed. And I don't understand why he's standing up here saying that we don't have the ability to do it. That's what's wrong with Washington. It's because people don't want to go above and beyond to get the job done.
Would you like to respond to that?
Look, Austin says that we should give more money to the Coast Guard. I've consistently voted to give them that money over and over again in the form of the budgets for the Department of Homeland Security. I've got a good, strong record, and I think absolutely, let's push for more enforcement. But I've been meeting with lobstermen for 6 years now, and this is not high on the list of things that they have usually brought to my attention that they're most concerned about. Number one, the regulations on whales, which I have helped block now to protect those jobs. The gauge increase, I have heard from them repeatedly about issues like this. The gray zone area, I'm certainly aware of. It's already illegal. It's on the books. It's a contested maritime border, and the Coast Guard's going to do the very best job that they can with the resources that I've helped give to them.
All right, let's go to Mike, because I think he has a follow-up on this as well.
Yeah, I just want to take you to the news around this policy area, right? Yesterday, federal regulators confirmed that a right whale died after getting entangled in Maine fishing gear. It was the first reported entanglement linked to Maine gear in 20 years and the first whale death ever attributed to the fishery. What's your reaction to that? And maybe more importantly, how do you think it affects the policy around this? So, Austin.
As you mentioned, this is a very rare phenomenon. And so I think we need to pivot the conversation back to the monkey in the room, which is that development on the offshore of whether it's Maine or on the East Coast is going to result in more deaths of these right whales. At the end of the day, offshore wind is being developed because the money is coming out of Washington, D.C. to subsidize it. And not only are you paying it with higher costs, and you're going to in the future, but it's going to decimate our industry. And so the lobstermen are getting blamed for one very rare issue, but nobody, and in fact, there's been cover-ups of the fact that every time they go out there and try to develop these offshore wind terminals, there are literally whales that are dying. And so we want to address the issue, let's go after the real issue, and that's the fact that these developments are popping up. The lobster industry has been very committed to opposing offshore wind, and Jared Golden's flip-flopped on it. If you don't support offshore wind, Jared, why did you vote to allow so much money to be spent in the clean energy economy, which will essentially subsidize these large companies and these large developers to set up and lobby for increasing the offshore wind terminals that are now being discussed here in the state of Maine? You're trying to fight against it, but you can't fight money.
Let's go ahead and get to Jared Golden, please.
Sure. He's talking about the Inflation Reduction Act still. And again, more oil and gas production than ever before in the history of the United States in 2023, a direct result of that bill. Yes, there's money in there for renewable energy as well, but also critically important, policies that are pushing forward energy across the board, including oil and gas, driving down gas prices. Are you saying you would have voted no against that? And against all the money for seniors here in Maine and driving down healthcare costs? These are the tough choices you have to make. On offshore wind, I will just say this. I have put in legislation to say no offshore wind in LMA1. That's like 80% of where we do our fishing for lobster in the state of Maine. And I'm going to continue to oppose offshore wind in the Gulf of Maine. I've got a strong record on this, and at the end of the day, I actually feel quite confident that Maine's lobstermen in those communities know where I've stood, and they know that I have their back.
I feel like we could keep talking about this for our last 17 minutes. I would like to move on, but I will give you one last chance.
Just briefly respond and talk directly to the people that are listening. And that's why people are frustrated that Washington's broken, because if there was more people that were willing to stand up from both sides and say, you know what, we're not ready to vote on this bill. This bill is bad. There's some good things in it, but we need to amend it. It needs to be reformed. Then we wouldn't have to even have this conversation. Let's lower costs for seniors. Let's cap insulin prices. Let's negotiate with Medicare. Let's make sure we do all that stuff. But don't do it on the backs of ratepayers. And when I say ratepayers, I'm talking about each and every one of you that's paying double and triple your electricity bill because of the bad energy policies coming out of Augusta, which are being funded because of Jared Golden's bad energy policies in D.C.
All right, 30 seconds to Jared Golden, then we are moving on, please. If you're ready, we can move on right now. Thank you very much. All right, you just mentioned Medicare, Mr. Theriault. Let's go ahead and ask a question about that. It's based on an ad as well, so we do want to play part of this. It's about the future of Social Security and Medicare. Here's a part of that ad.
They want to slash Social Security and Medicare.
And raise the retirement age to 70.
They handpicked Austin Theriault to run for Congress.
All right, that's just a portion of that ad. That came from the Golden campaign. It claims that Republicans and Austin Theriault are not to be trusted with programs that seniors care deeply about. Two things. Who should be trusted on this issue? And secondly, the fact that Social Security, the combined trust fund, is set to run out of money and will pay reduced benefits on the last estimate, I believe, 2035, without changes. What do you do? So it's about trust on this issue, and it's about what you do. And again, let's start with Jared Golden. 1 minute, please.
I'll just start with Medicare. Look at my record. I have, just in the last year, capped costs for seniors with diabetes, for insulin, at $35. It's a huge savings. We're now going to be saving seniors in Maine, about 100,000 of them on Medicare Part D, hundreds of dollars per year on their prescription medications. That's all under the Medicare program. It's also saving Medicare hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 10 years, which is going to address the underlying funding problems with that particular program. On Social Security, I will just say Austin has no plan at all. He's taken a pledge to not support tax increases. You cannot restore solvency to the Social Security Trust Fund without doing that. And the best way to do it is to lift the cap on contributions for the wealthiest of people in this country. Currently, they stop contributing into Social Security on their annual wages at $168,000 a year. There's not many people in Maine that make that much money. And if those people contributed on every single dollar, the same as working class, middle class people do in this country, then we could automatically cover about 70 to 80% of that gap in Social Security funding that is just around the corner. And if we don't do anything, it'll be, by law, a statutory 20% cut to existing benefits for today's seniors. We can't let that happen.
And Austin Theriault, the same topic area. Again, the ad claims you can't be trusted on this issue. Secondly, what is your plan?
Well, I'm curious to know whether Jared Golden still stands by that ad, and I've been consistent to say I'm not going to cut Social Security and Medicare. At the end of the day, there's only going to be one solution, and that's going to be a bipartisan solution. We're going to have to sit down at the table and figure this out once and for all. It's being used as a political football right now. This side's going to cut your Social Security. This side's going to protect your Social Security. I am going to protect Social Security because it's personal to me. I just lost my 97-year-old grandmother. She was on Social Security. My 82-year-old grandfather and 79-year-old grandmother are watching tonight, and they depend on Social Security. My grandmother's had a pre-existing condition, a very extreme case of arthritis ever since I can remember as a kid. And so she depends on these programs to make ends meet. Her prescription costs are astronomical, and if it wasn't for the program, she wouldn't be able to do this. One thing that nobody's discussing right now is the fact that our workforce participation is going down. And that is going to threaten Medicare and these programs, Social Security included. I believe we need to get more people into the workforce, and people are not going into the workforce for a variety of reasons, including child care, including the access to workforce housing. But right now we need to make sure that we reform our welfare program so that people feel like they can go off into the workforce. They can work an extra 20, 30, 40 hours without getting their benefits cut. That is keeping a lot of people out of the workforce. Now, when we get more people in the workforce, they're paying taxes, they're shoring up Social Security. The reason Social Security is going to go under is because there's more people that are taking benefits than putting in. We need more people putting in, and that's why immigration reform is another part of the solution.
Okay, quick follow-up from Mike, and just 1 minute each, please.
Just real quick, Austin, because you don't have a record on this, but House Republicans generally propose raising the retirement age for full Social Security benefits, future beneficiaries we're talking about. One recent proposal, 67 to 69. Do you support raising the retirement age?
No, I don't. And I put out an op-ed saying that I will oppose my own party if they were to put legislation forth that would make it more challenging for seniors to be able to use these programs. I understand at the end of the day, you know, I'm running as a Republican, but I'm running to represent all people. And so that's my record. In fact, I'll go back to it once again. My voting record in the Maine House of Representatives was one of the most bipartisan records. You can look it up. I'm proud of that. I'm proud to come from an area in the St. John Valley that's pretty much Democrat. As a Republican, I can represent them well because I understand those issues, I understand those people, and I understand that these issues are complex.
I'd like to get to two more topic areas, but Jared Golden, if you'd like to respond to that. Otherwise, I'd like to move on.
Go ahead.
All right, we're going to move on. Two issues, first off, that we think that people care deeply about, so I want to get to them. Since the Supreme Court did overturn Roe v. Wade 2 years ago, monumental changes to abortion laws around America. There's a national debate right now about whether this issue is best decided state by state, or if there needs to be a federal law, even a constitutional amendment. On either side, where do the two of you stand on this issue when it comes to abortion laws? And based on our alternating format, Austin Theriault, I think we start this one with you.
Well, some people have seen Jared Golden is paying for and endorsing false ads that are claiming some things that are not true. At the end of the day, I've said many times I'm not in favor of a federal ban. I support IVF. I support contraceptives. This is being used as a political weapon in a campaign season. I don't know if it's because of desperation. I'm not sure if it's because people are giving you bad information. I'm not sure what it is. At the end of the day, that would just be like saying that I call you a Bernie Sanders supporter or something like AOC because you're supported by leadership. We can do better than this. I support things that are going to make sure families can stay here in the state of Maine, things like increasing access to child care, increasing access to housing. We need to drive down inflation so that people feel like they can raise a family. So that's my record at the end of the day. I understand this is a complex issue, but there's certainly more we agree on, and I do feel like Jared's using this to distract from his record of lack of leadership here in the 2nd District to solve the problems that we're facing here in the state of Maine.
Before I move on, the core of the question, though, state by state, you're fine with that, or should it be decided at the federal level?
The voters are deciding this issue right now, and so as somebody that's running for Congress, I'm not going to vote for a national ban. I want to let the voters in each state decide. Okay. Jared Golden, same question to you, please.
Oh, look, my record is very clear. I'm 100% in support of women's reproductive freedom. I'm in support of their right to choose to have an abortion, and I've consistently voted to protect that right. Austin has a voting record on this issue in Augusta that shows that he's on the other side of the issue. You can look at his voting record just in the last 2 years. He's consistently voted against women's reproductive freedom right here in the state of Maine. The fact of the matter is, around the country right now, millions of women are losing that right in states that are putting in de facto bans, 6-week bans, other really terrible laws being put into place. I think a good question for Austin, he says he won't support a federal ban. Would he support a federal floor of protection for those millions of women around the country who've had that right taken away from them?
I would extend to Austin Theriault if you'd like to respond.
I'll just say it again. I believe the voters in the states are deciding this right now. In fact, You can look at my record. When I ran for State House, I ran on keeping Maine's law as it was, and that was a bipartisan law that both sides worked on. I ran on that law, and I ran on supporting that law. In fact, Governor Mills and former Governor LePage ran on that as well. And the fact that this is being used politically, I think, is unfortunate. There's certainly more that we agree on than we disagree on with this issue. And let's get back to the issues that matter.
Let's turn to a next issue, if we may. If I'd like to, again, I promised there were a couple of issues that we really wanted to get to that people care deeply about. And the next one's, we've actually already talked briefly about it, is immigration. The Maine delegation long agreeing that the federal government should allow legal asylum seekers to be able to work faster, although bipartisan immigration reforms, all those have stalled. What are your priorities when it comes to this issue, specifically when it comes to asylum seekers and the work permits, but also the larger issue of can there be bipartisan agreement on reforming an immigration system that everybody seems to agree is a broken one? And based on our alternating system, Jared Golden, to you.
Yeah, the entire Maine delegation, from Senator Collins and King to Shelley Pingree and myself, have said if we're going to have asylees in Maine, yes, they should be working. Current law doesn't allow for that. It often takes 18 to 24, sometimes even longer, for them to get a work permit. That's a bad scenario for the state of Maine. We need those people working if they're going to be here, and I believe that they would like to work themselves. So that's one good solution. I do want to take a minute to talk about my record as it relates to the border security, and immigration.
Please.
The 9th vote that I took in Congress back in 2019 gave $20 billion to Customs and Border Patrol and ICE. It included $1.3 billion for construction of the border wall. Across 6 years, I voted for about $80 billion for CBP, for Border Patrol, for ICE, about $7 billion for the border wall. That's my record. You can't even contest it. That's the money that I put towards securing our border. Every single year or Congress that I've been a part of, I've been the lead sponsor of a Title 42 authority to allow for the immediate expulsion of migrants or illegal immigrants on site. Now, that's an authority that went away with the COVID-19 public health emergency, and I've been pushing to try and get it back. So I have a very strong record on the border and on immigration, and yet Austin's always trying to twist my record and misportray it. So I think it's important to set that straight right off the bat here.
All right, we'll come back in discussion. Yeah. Austin Theriault, same question to you.
So Greg, we had a situation in this country during the Trump administration when border encounters were fairly low. And it was discussed, in order for us to keep it that way, that we wanted to build a border fence, whatever you want to call it, a border wall. When Jared had an opportunity to vote, he voted no on that bill. It was a political football once again. He didn't want to make any mistake that he felt like the voters were going to get mad at him about. Now, what happened since then? We didn't address the issue, right? And because Biden rolled back a lot of the Trump-era policies, including Remain in Mexico, we have an influx of people coming to this country. I know are looking for a better opportunity, but unfortunately, there's a percentage of them that are coming here for the wrong reasons. So I believe we have to have comprehensive immigration reform, but we have to start by securing the border. We have to start by making sure people can't just come across willy-nilly, bringing across drugs, human trafficking and sex trafficking. It's a humanitarian crisis, and now we're seeing it in some of our communities. Yes, these people should be allowed to work, but why do we have this situation in the first place, where there's people here that are on the system using general assistance when we could have addressed it in the first place, had a controlled immigration process? And so, you know, I don't blame you for everything, Jared. I blame you for voting to prevent the crisis, and I blame Congress for not addressing the issue when it had an opportunity.
We need to get to closings in about a minute and a half. Mike, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just for you, Austin, real quick. Maine's delegation did support the bipartisan immigration bill from the Senate that failed to pass back in February. Former President Trump urged Republicans to vote against it. You opposed it, mostly citing foreign aid that was attached to it. In your judgment, did any of this measure show a way forward for Congress on comprehensive immigration reform that you just said you wanted?
30 seconds, please.
Yes, keep it brief. I believe it was a decent start, and I'm very proud that the National Border Patrol Council endorsed me today because they know I'm going to be tough on the border issue, because it's an issue we have to address. One of the concerns I did have with that bill, and the administration wouldn't allow for a reform of a program that's allowing people to fly into this country at somewhere between like 20 or 30,000 a month coming into this country. There's very little vetting of that process. There is some sort of background check, But really, at the end of the day, there's a lot of fraud, and there are people coming into this country that are dangerous criminals, and it's a situation that we have to reverse, and that's going to be what I want to do. I want to have bipartisan immigration reform in the next Congress.
That same Border Patrol union that Austin says has endorsed him endorsed that legislation in the United States Senate, which was then killed by Republicans, and Austin says he would have voted against it. And I just want to be clear. My record on this, $80 billion, $7 billion for the border wall, 22,000 Border Patrol agents, the largest force that we've ever had in operation. That's my record. It is what it is. He can spin it all he wants.
That's got to be the last word on this. We could talk for another hour if we had the time. Unfortunately, we don't. We conclude now this debate with a brief closing statement from each candidate. 1 minute each, based on a coin flip. Again, we're going to begin the closing statements with Jared Golden. The floor is yours.
Oh, listen, I just want to say to folks back home, I've been doing this for 6 years now. We've been through this together, these campaigns 3 times. This is the 4th one. You know what my record is. I know who I am. You know who I am. I've had one of the most bipartisan records in the House of Representatives. You can look at a graph where there's all the Republican voting patterns, all the Dem voting patterns out here, and there's 2 lonely dots right in the middle. That's me and Brian Fitzpatrick, a Republican from Pennsylvania. The most bipartisan members of Congress, and our voting record reflects it. That's the way that I've done the job. I've always been thoughtful, pragmatic, and taken a balanced path. That's the way that Mainers like it, and that's the way that I pledge to continue to do it. I'm asking for your continued confidence in your vote on November 5th, and I want to thank you for tuning in tonight.
All right. Jared Golden, thank you very much. Austin Theriault, you have 1 minute for your closing statement as well, please.
Well, thank you to the listeners who are, in some cases, introducing myself for the first time tonight. I appreciate the opportunity. Let me ask you, and it's been asked before by different folks, are you better off now than you were even 4 or 6 years ago? And I think for most people, the answer is no. Congress needs to do a better job working across the aisle. Congress needs to do a better job sticking up for what it believes in. At the end of the day, I've been a member of the State House of Representatives who's worked across the aisle to get the job done, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's supporting our forest products industry. I'm somebody that believes we need to put people over politics, and there's too much extremism down in D.C., and there's not enough balance. I want to fight for you given the opportunity, and it's not just going to be during campaign season when you see my ads to ask to be reelected. It's going to be working with you hand in hand on the ground, whether you're a small business, whether you're a family farm, whether you work in the forest products industry or the lobster industry. Any industry, any walk of life, I want to work side by side with you to strengthen our local economy, provide good paying jobs, make sure families can stay here, and make sure, frankly, families that were born here are not forced to leave the state because of the tremendous cost of living increases coming out of Washington, D.C.
Thank you very much. Again, as I said, we could continue to talk for a while here. We certainly hope you learned something at home from the candidates tonight that helps inform you as you get ready to vote. Thanks to the candidates. Thank you to Mike Shepard and his colleagues at the Bangor Daily News. And of course, thank you to you, our viewers, for tuning in tonight. If you missed any part of tonight's debate or you just want to watch it again, you can scan the QR code on your screen right now. It's going to take you right to this debate on our website. And of course, stay with CBS 13 and the Bangor Daily News for complete coverage right through the election night and of course beyond as well. For CBS 13, I'm Greg Lagerquist. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great night.